Good morning. Out here taking a little bit of a walk, surveying the forest, seeing if there's some more trees that need to come down for firewood this year. I was out doing a little bit of firewood, so I'm some sawdust on me here. So I apologize if I am not in a three-piece suit, because I try to do that a lot, but I just wanted to come out here this morning and address a subject which has been a problem for a long time. And I guess when it comes down to it, it's my fault. I'll take the blame for it. I'm not going to blame former viewers or something, because I'm not always clear on things. If you would talk to my wife and my son, they would tell you that there's times where I just kind of do things and then I look at them kind of, what are you doing? Like they're supposed to understand what's in my head, because there are certain things that just come natural in me. Coming out here, felling trees, I know which way that tree is leaning. I know if I need to fell it against the lean or with the lean, or where the lay of the tree is going to be, and how I'm going to lay out things with, felling trees and doing firewood. And I just assume, and all of a sudden I'll hear my wife and my son, they'll say, where should we stand? I just kind of, and I assume that they know where to stand. And then I think, okay, but they don't have a background in logging, so they don't know. And okay, I'm sorry. I should say something about that. And, and it's that way with a lot of other things too. I'm a little bit hard-headed, if you could say it that way. But I do the same thing with the ministry. I assume certain things, and so I just don't bother explaining it. A lot of people, they would really, get into prayer, and they'd pray for hours before doing some kind of sermon. And that's never been the method that I use. I just kind of say, well, Lord, either you're going to help me or you're not, and either this will come out good or else it'll just completely flop, and then you can just kick me out of the ministry. And that's my attitude. Maybe not the best attitude in the world, but and there are times I do pray a good amount before doing a study. So I'm not saying I don't pray, but it's one of my blind spots, if you can say it that way. One of the areas where I have to improve, I guess, but it's difficult for me to do because it's just kind of part of who I am. Tell you another little story tying into this whole thing. Back when I was a teenager, I would ride with friends. We had miles of trails where I grew up. We'd ride our dirt bikes or our four-wheelers or whatever. And I just assumed that they knew where we were going. And so sometimes I'd get into riding, and I had a Yamaha Banshee, and a 1987 Yamaha Banshee, first year for the Banshees. And wish I still had it, but I don't. But I'd be riding, and I'd be zipping along pretty good, and having fun, seeing how fast I can go down the trails and up the hill climbs and everything. And I'd, get way out to where we're crossing over another road to go to another area, and I'd stop and look back. Where are the other guys at? And then I'd shut the Banshee off, and I'd sit there. I don't even hear them. Where'd they go? I'd left them so far back behind. And then I'd end up having to go back, and they'd say, man, where'd you go? What were you doing? You just left us back there. We don't know where we're going. Oh yeah, that's right. It's not intentional. It's not that I'm trying to be a jerk. It's just that I forget myself sometimes. All right, so please understand that about my character. And, one of the big things is people will say to me, and I've met people in person, they'll ask me, they'll say, Brother Brian, who else do you recommend that we should listen to? And, again, I just assume that people think, study a lot of different people out there and whatever. I just assume that people know that. I assume that people know that I'm not trying to be the only guy that you listen to. But unfortunately, a lot of times I come off that way, that you shouldn't listen to anybody else but me, and if you listen to somebody else but me, you're probably going to hell. Well, I don't believe that way. I've never taught that. All right, and people, they'll lie about me. I've seen it, and they'll say that that's what I teach, and it's not what I teach. And you know, I'll grant you, there's not many preachers left that stick by the King James Bible and don't undermine it and whatever, but they're out there, and they do put out some information and things, and you know, it's not my responsibility to go and find them. I don't have time for that. You have to go out and you have to weigh that stuff out yourself, search and listen to different guys, you know, and ultimately, you know, you'll get back to this thing of it is your personal relationship with Jesus Christ that you have to work on. And you will find that everybody out there, every preacher that you listen to, they'll be wrong in some area. They'll say something and something that's stupid or whatever else. And what you have to do is you have to have some grace. And you have to say, okay, better choice of words there, preacher or Brother Brian, but I know what he meant. I understand what he was saying, but he should have said it a little bit different than that. That's the mark of a grown-up Christian. The mark of an immature Christian is one that's just, you know, thinks that I'm some kind of a super duper preacher, that I don't say anything wrong, and they just, you know, want to, I don't even know what, put a picture of me on the wall or something, or, you know, put little candles there, burn little candles to it or something. I mean, some people out there just think that I'm some ultra great guy, you know. Well, I appreciate that. There is scripture for that in terms of, you know, esteeming a man very highly in love for his work's sake, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. Sure, okay, but be careful. Remember that I'm just a man. And, but you know, these guys, I've seen this thing many times where I'm the only one that they listen to. And again, see, I'm assuming that if I expose somebody else, like I go against Chick Tracks or Sam Gipp or Peter Ruckman or something like that, I'm assuming that that person listening knows that I'm not saying I'm condemning everything that they say. Okay, but I don't say that sometimes, or I don't make it very clear. And so what happens is then the people just take the list and they have a big list of Bible-believing preachers, and then they go, oh, Brother Brian said no to this one, no to that one, no to that one, no to this one. Well, how did I say no? Well, because he exposed it, so I shouldn't listen to these people. And I've probably said some of that stuff. You know, I don't recommend this guy or whatever, and I should have been clearer on that. I should have said, in this area he's wrong, and I wouldn't recommend listening to him on this particular subject or something. You know, here's the rock, the big rock. Not the real big one, that's over that way. But this is a pretty good sized one. Pretty interesting. I've shown that in other videos if you've seen some of the other walk and talks. But listen to others. I wouldn't listen to too many guys that read out of new versions, because the Holy Spirit's not leading them to read out of these corrupt satanic new versions. So I'd be careful about that. That's one I will say, you know, don't bother listening to these new version guys, certainly. But if they use a King James Bible, go ahead and listen to them. A lot of my sayings and things I've learned came from guys that I wouldn't even, you know, darken the doors of their church building, and yet I learned something from them. So you have to weigh that stuff out, brethren. But you know, I've seen this thing, you know, and I've seen it many times where I'll see people and they'll say, I used to listen to Brian Denlinger, or sometimes they don't even say my name, because once they come out and stand against the heretic, then you can't speak his name anymore. It's some kind of a, I don't know what. But I've seen people and they'll say, I used to listen to Brian Denlinger, and he was, you know, I thought he was great and everything, and then I left him, and then, you know, I found he was wrong on whatever, name a subject that people disagree with me on, and then they come out and then they just erase everything I've said, you know, or they might have a little bit more grace and they'll say, well, I think he's right on a lot of things, but he's really wrong on a few, so I just don't listen to him anymore, you know. So I just want to apologize for not being very clear about my stands for listening to other people. Listen to other preachers, fine. If they use a King James Bible, listen to them. There's some good men out there, others that are not so good. It's all part of the learning process, brethren. You're not going to find a guy that is right 100% of the time. God won't allow that. God will not allow his word to be usurped as the perfect standard on earth. He will not allow a man to know it exactly perfectly. But when you grow up, you'll start to say, yeah, I appreciate brother so-and-so and some of the things that he said or whatever. So hopefully I've made that clearer now. Hopefully I won't get accused of, leading a cult or something, or I'm Diotrephes. That's another one I get. I think it's 3 John. Talks about this man named Diotrephes who loves to have the preeminence, and he casts people out of the church and forbids others to come in and everything else, and they say, well, that's Brother Brian. No, actually, if you knew me, you would understand that I have a lot of grace, a whole lot of grace. Back years ago, when we had our house church, we would meet with somebody before we would allow them to come in and be part of it, be part of the fellowship. I'll tell you a story here in just a minute, but I'm going to show you this. This is called a false morel mushroom. Let me just flip this thing around here, and I'll get you, you can see the false morel. It's not a real morel mushroom. It's not a good morel. It's a false morel. Looks like a little brain or something. So, in case you've never seen a false morel, I was so excited the one time, I saw these mushrooms growing in early spring, and I thought, oh, they're morel mushrooms. Wow, morel mushrooms. Because they're kind of wrinkly like that. I thought these are just kind of darker ones. Maybe they're dark chocolate morel mushrooms or something. I wasn't quite that dumb, but went and looked it up, and they're poisonous. They're not good. Nuts, So I've never actually had a wild morel mushroom. I do go out occasionally, and we found chanterelle mushrooms are pretty good, and puffball mushrooms, the little ones, are pretty good. Here's a, what are they called? Birch polypore down here. I'll pick one. That's an old one, but that's a birch polypore. There's some medicinal uses to these. Not very tasty, but you can get some medicinal stuff from it. But getting back to the story, I'll show you. Well, actually, sorry, I'm distracted. Well, in God's creation, that could happen. Here you can see how the birch polypores grow on this birch tree here. So, but they're actually a kind of a northern superfood, another one that's really good. Birch trees have chaga mushrooms, which are kind of dark, woody, harder ones, and then they have polypore on them. They both are good. Getting back to the story, there was a guy, we called him Crazy Charlie. I won't say his last name, but and he came, and we're talking to him and things, and I started getting the post-trib, sort of replacement theology, kind of the weird thing, and I thought, and I actually heard about local church Bible publishers from him, so see, I learned something even from a heretic. But the guy was just he was a nut, and he was, and I just basically had to say to him, no, sorry, it's not going to work out, because he was really way out. But we had other people come to our house church, and we weren't even in total agreement on some issues, and it was fine as long as they had the main core beliefs fine, and they were born again. Okay, we can agree to disagree on some other things that I hold to be the truth, whatever. So before you judge me, and before you think, well, Brother Brian is just this evil guy and whatever else, I'm not. And I apologize, like I said, if I come across that way, that I'm some kind of know-it-all and whatever else, and disfellowship with all kinds of different people. That's not me. And if you look at the comment section of my videos, you'll see I leave a lot of heretical comments there. And I see, a lot of the other ministry channels out there, and barely anybody even says anything against them. just, oh, brother so-and-so, I love you, and I love your preaching, and I thank God for your preaching. All this other stuff. Well, that's fine, that's good. It's nice to see that, but, you know, a lot of these guys, that's all that they get. You don't see a single comment rebuking them. Me, I'd say probably half the comments are rebuking me. And people really angry at me and threatening me and all kinds of stuff. So, well, we need to get going here, I guess, soon. Peeled logs behind me. I peeled another one. Find it very appealing. But that's going to be it. And please expand your horizons. You know, Sam Gepp puts out some really good information on the Bible version issue. Praise the Lord for the stuff that he puts out. I wouldn't listen to his advice on the thing of going to a church building, and he masked up with a lot of the others and things during the whole scamdemic thing. I have an issue with that. David Daniels, great information on the Bible version issue. Wonderful information. Some issues with their tracts. I don't really like the fact that they put out a black Jesus tract so as not to offend the black people out there. That's blasphemy. Jesus was not a black man. Jesus was not a white man. Jesus was, he came to the earth in the form of a Jew. He came into his own, and his own received him not. Jesus says, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All right. I realize the whole thing with how he was born. He's begotten of God, not of Mary. I get it. I understand it. I did a whole study on that. All right. But to say that Jesus was something else, we have to make Jesus into whatever race we are or whatever, that's wrong. He came to the Jews. All right. So that will be it. And a bunch of studies to do coming up here. And if you could continue to pray, we have another appointment tomorrow to look at a house. And we're continuing to pray about different options. We're just going to see it. Okay, this one, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Maybe we could try to build something on the property here. I have no idea. I'm just trying to be as efficient as I can in the ministry, try to get out as much information as I can. That's what I do, what I do. That's why I do what I do. All right, please watch other people, okay? You know, what more can I say? But that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching.